Hello and welcome to another episode of 8 Questions, our semi-regular interview series with movers and shakers here in RVA. I'm your host, 8 News anchor Juan Conde. Our guest today represents an industry that many of us think we know about. And I say think we know about because we really don't know the truth. We've been influenced by people we see on TV and images we have in our head from books and movies. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting the lowdown on private investigators from a man who knows very well that business here in the Commonwealth. His name is John Morse. He is currently the executive director of the PI Association of Virginia. He's been in this business for almost 20 years now. It's a pleasure to have John with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Juan.
All righty, so my first question is, I did write it down. What do private investigators do?
That's such a broad question.
It is. I thought I'd open up.
Well, thank you. So private investigators ultimately seek the truth, regardless of what the subject matter is. So it can be anything from liability issue, workers' comp type case, but more commonly it's domestic or civil related cases. So cheating spouses, child custody, missing persons, that sort of thing. And
what are private investigators allowed to do to pursue the truth in those cases?
Well, private investigators are really different than law enforcement, right? Because law enforcement has the ability to grab subpoenas and warrants and go behind closed doors, where private investigators have to operate from a distance in a lot of cases. We don't have the benefit of subpoenaing records unless it's through civil litigation where a lawyer's involved, and they're really doing that aspect of the work. So what we do is we monitor. We read body language, we read people, we use human psychology, maybe a little social engineering, tools of the trade to get the answers that we need to for the subject that we're looking for.
It is, I think, I've heard, very, very difficult to prove infidelity. So in a divorce case, so you see a man and a woman who are not married to one another enter a house at 8 o'clock in the evening. They come out the next morning at 5 o'clock. Maybe wearing the same clothes, maybe wearing different clothes. Is it difficult to prove what happened behind those closed doors if you see them walk in, spend a couple of hours, and then come back out? How do you infer what occurs?
It's really not. So the Supreme Court...
not difficult at all.
It's not. I mean, the Supreme Court ruled years ago that courts are not, the judges are not obligated to stick their head in the ground, essentially, and pretend nothing's going on. So we use a 2-element litmus test to it. One is public displays of affection, desire, that sort of thing. So you may, somebody may come to us with a whole list of text messages or emails that they've intercepted from their spouses, and that may show intent and desire for someone. Yes. But if they don't actually have the ability to act on those desires, then there's no inference necessarily to infidelity. Now, it could be an emotional affair, but that's not enough to prove a physical connection. At the same time, we may have 2 people, let's say, that work together who have a lot of time together behind closed doors, but there's no inference of desire. So it's when you combine those 2 elements that we're able to get a preponderance of the evidence to prove that they're in a relationship, that likely they're not praying all night long or, whatever the claim may be.
No, almost certainly not. Okay, so we're laughing, but getting this information is probably very, very tedious, very painstaking, and regulated by the state.
Absolutely.
You explained to me. So I think we kind of have this sort of maverick, or when I say maverick, I mean like James Garner maverick idea of a private investigator who's sort of banging out cases and people knock on the door and Sam Spade stuff. How closely is your work does your work resemble at all what we see in TV and movies?
Very rarely. It's long hours. People unfortunately don't mess up during 9 to 5 hours. Typically they're at their jobs, so it's 6 o'clock to 6 a.m. that our investigators are in the field doing their jobs. And so it's a lot of long hours, a lot of sitting and waiting for that 5 seconds of photographic evidence or proof that it's needed for that given case.
Let's talk about that for a second. What do you need to be a private investigator, and what are some of the skills that you look for in people trying to get into the business? You mentioned photography, so if you can't shoot a camera, not a gun, But if you can't shoot a camera, maybe they're not someone you're looking for.
Certainly. So a mastery of their own tools, just like say an auto mechanic would be. If he doesn't have his own tools or doesn't know how to use the tools, he's not going to be a very effective mechanic. It's no different than the PI industry, you know, where we have a myriad of different cameras and for different weather conditions, different circumstances, different distances, whatever it may be. And the more tools we have in our toolbox, the more effective our photography is going to be or our videoing is going to be.
So do you have I want to say hydroponic, but that's for plants. A hyperbolic, what do you call a microphone with a dish on the back of it that's able to pick up sound from far away? Parabolic? Parabolic
microphone. No, we actually don't use those.
Because they're kind of obtrusive.
Well, they're obtrusive and they're actually illegal in most cases. So it's illegal to record a conversation
unless somebody consents.
Right, and that you're not a part of. So,
and that's just here in Virginia.
Yeah, every state is a little bit different.
What are you limited by? What does the law limit you from doing here in Virginia when you're a private investigator? And are those restrictions different in other states?
Every state is different. Virginia tends to be one of the more regulated private investigator divisions through the Department of Criminal Justice Services. Really, it boils down to knowing the laws, working within those boundaries, and meeting the state requirements.
There would be nothing preventing you from walking behind someone every single step they took in public if you thought it suited your purpose.
Certainly.
Now, you wouldn't be surreptitious or a surprise to them, but you could literally walk behind them and just follow them around all day.
Really, the only real exception in the state code for private investigating is stalking. That's the one crime that we cannot be charged with if we're doing it in the course of our jobs. Because really what a private investigator is a professional stalker. As ugly as that sounds, that's the reality of it. Whether we're watching someone or a party, you know, from 10 feet away or 1,000 feet away, it's our job to follow them from point A to point B or draw from what they're doing, the inferences from what they're doing. So.
Are many people who, let's go back to the way people can get into the industry. What qualities do you look for, or what background do you look for in someone who wants to become a private investigator? Are you looking for ex-police officers, ex-military, because they're disciplined and know some things that you guys need, or who do you look for?
So,
who are good candidates?
I'm a big proponent of hiring former military. There's a certain amount of training and rigidity that they have that is amazing. But really, it boils down to you either have a natural curiosity or you don't. You either have the ability to outthink and outstep your person. It's a real-life chess match is what it boils down to.
You've talked mostly about personal surveillance, but do you guys pour through records and documents and that sort of thing, despite the fact that you don't have subpoena power? Do you go through someone's trash, say?
There have been occasions where we've needed to do that. Certainly on a 110-degree day, going through someone's trash is not the most pleasant thing in the world to do, but it's part of the public thoroughfare. So at that point, we're able to grab it. And we have access, of course, to databases that the general public doesn't get access to, but it's all ultimately public-facing data.
And you mentioned that you just can't be a private eye. You just can't put a shingle on the door and say, I'm an investigator. You have to be you're licensed by the state to do this.
That's correct. So the Department of Criminal Justice Services, the same organization that regulates all the police departments in the state, regulates several other subsect industries, and private investigations is one of them.
So because of that regulation and those sanctions that you have when you begin this work, is the evidence that you submit, so the information you collect is admissible in court without question? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, obviously a defense attorney could refute what you're saying, sure, but the court will accept your findings as what? Are they given more credence or less credence than anything else presented?
Well, I guess it depends on what it's being compared to, but generally speaking, an investigator is held to a higher standard. So one of the big benefits in civil litigation is we can offer the courts an independent view backed up by physical evidence that eliminates the he said, she said that the judges hear every day.
Okay, so you are considered to be sort of an impartial arbiter, despite, or that you're going to deliver the truth despite the fact that you've been paid or are retained by one party. Speaking of retainers, how much does private investigation cost, John?
That question I get 50 times a day.
Do you want a 50-cent hamburger or do you want a $300 hamburger?
It really depends. I mean, just like an attorney may charge $200 an hour and the next attorney may charge $1,200 an hour.
Is that how much it is these days? Oh, gosh.
It's really reflective of the services that you get. And so, you know, there are some companies out here that charge really low rates. There are companies that are unlicensed, unfortunately, and doing work illegally in the state.
Let's stop right there. There is a database, I'd imagine the state has, of licensed private investigator firms. That's correct. So check that if you want a private investigator. Just don't go looking for somebody.
That's correct. So every, in beginning July 1st, it becomes a requirement in the state law that every licensed private investigation firm must list their DCJS license number in all advertisements. Okay. So you'll see currently, if you Google our company, you'll see in every ad it's got a DCJS license number associated with that. And so that's something that we hope that the public will look for when they're doing their due diligence and research on a company to ensure that they're doing business with a licensed entity.
You mentioned, I think people think of private investigators in fidelity and fiduciary sort of stuff, financial things, but you also do work with missing persons, yes. I understand, and that's sort of how you came to me through a referral. Someone said, hey, John does great work with missing persons. Talk about that part of the profession.
So, you know, and I joke, I say this lightheartedly, but ultimately there's not so many, my husband after 25 years just cheated on me, or my wife is going out, you know, all hours of the night, what's going on, that you can put up with in a day before you have to find something good karma-wise to give back to the community. Okay. And for us, that is missing persons. And so we are contacted quite regularly, or we will see a missing persons case that we'll volunteer our services for. And we do these cases at no charge. The family's already going through enough, whether it's a cold case that's been sitting there for 25 years, or it's, you know, somebody that ran away last night. And we work all of them in between, and we do it again at no charge to the families.
Are there cases in which you do, I mean, some of the work is pro bono, but if I came to you and had the means, I could say, hey, look, we need to find my daughter, 3 months gone.
We won't accept the money.
Really?
We will not accept money.
No. So either you'll take my case or you won't, but you won't charge
That's
me.
correct.
What do you bring to a missing persons investigation that police will not? Because I think that, you know, folks think, well, police will certainly do all they can, and that's all that can be done, but you're implying that's not the case.
Well, you know, listen, law enforcement...
I'm not disparaging police.
Absolutely not. Law enforcement does an amazing job, and they have access to certain tools that we simply just do not have in a missing persons case. The reason why a lot of these cases end up going cold is Detective A, he has a missing persons case this morning. This afternoon he's got a homicide. Tomorrow morning he's got a robbery, and he's just overworked. He doesn't have the ability or the time to sit down and scour through the minute details, or spend the time in the field walking, literally talking to everybody that's there. The resources just aren't available, and so private investigators in general can be a good choice to turn to for help in these cases. So, yeah.
And in your case, you guys are doing this work pro bono, which is beautiful. I love that. You described being a private investigator as being long hours, tedious, a lot of boredom.
Yes. So
what's the upside? That curiosity that you talked about, fulfilling that curiosity? Is there excitement in it?
There is.
Camaraderie
there
in
is.
the ranks of private investigators?
You know, if you spend 50 hours on a case and you've got literally 10 minutes of actual productive work out of it, let's say, that 10 minutes is amazing. It's the drug that keeps you going. You know, it's just what it boils down to. At the end of the day, it's you're looking for that adrenaline rush, that piece of the puzzle, that aha, I got you, I was right, and you go on to your next case.
Most people who are missing run away, or are lured away, or are snatched away.
Well, we don't see a lot of, you know, abductions, right? But we see a lot of runaways, a lot of lured. In today's sex trafficking, human trafficking it's really become an epidemic that is not getting the appropriate coverage that it needs.
Because of the internet?
Sure, the internet can connect two strangers in a millisecond. And, you know, in today's world, particularly with our kids today, I mean, I've got teenage children. I see the social anxieties that they go through in school and the bullying, and, you know, sometimes they just want that person to confide in or to talk to, and they're a stranger at first, and then they become their best friend.
And then, hey, I'll be nice to you, we can be pals, let's hang out, before you know it.
Right. So they're sneaking out in the middle of the night, and maybe they go freely and think that they're heading to something that's better than, you know, the grass is greener on the other side syndrome. And 4 years later, you know, they're found, you know, in unfavorable circumstances, obviously. You know.
And that's a very pleasant way to put it.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want to tell me or the folks at home, John, that I've not asked you about? I tried to ask you about what you do, how you do it, who can do it, when you do it, why you do it, what's good about it, what's bad about it, how it's regulated. Surprise me.
Follow your gut. If something in your stomach tells you that the circumstances around you is not right, get the truth. Find the truth. We're here. We're not scary. We've done a lot of work over the last 20 years to move this industry from the dark alleys, long trench coats, you know, where you're meeting somebody, handing them cash to go spy on someone, to being a real agency and real people that, you know, work out of offices and have secretaries, and it's a real business. It's not, you know, some shady van in a corner of a parking lot anymore. So, you know, come on to this side. Don't be scared. Talk to us. We'll answer any questions that you have and help you get on to the other side.
Tell the folks at home the name of your firm.
Morse Investigation Services.
It has been a pleasure having you, Mr. Morse, with us today.
Thank you, sir.
On 8 Questions. Wow. Learn something new every day, don't you? Trust your gut. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the message tonight, or today, or this evening, whenever you're watching, from John Morse. That was a remarkable conversation. We're going to do this again in a couple of days. Our next guest is talking about a nonprofit working with kids here in the area and exposing them to the arts. But for now, that's all the time we have for 8 Questions. I'm a little bit tongue-tied. Still taking that all in. I'm your host, Juan Conde. We're back again in a couple of days. See you then. Really, I'm just like...